Everybody. I want to welcome everybody to January 2021, the start of our Farm and Community Education series through the Farmer Angel Network, excuse me. I'm Amanda Cura. I'm the Human Development and Relationships Educator through Sauk County Extension. And I have a couple of other members from the network who are on the series with us today. And when we do introductions, they'll go around and introduce themselves as well. I just wanted to take a minute to give us a couple of orientation points here as we get started in our series to remind those of you who may be new to the Farmer Angel Network Education Series. To let you know that we do want people to share their experiences during the event today because that helps others to learn and reach out for help or resources as they watch these events and encourages them to continue to join other future events. In doing that, we ask that you please only share what you're comfortable with in a public setting. And to that end, we do remind you that these sessions are recorded and that we will be posting the recorded sessions on social media sites for the purpose of connecting with others looking for information regarding the agricultural community and positive mental health and financial development. If at any time any of the Farmer Angel Network members and or the presenter feel a learner needs additional support or resources, we will reach out and provide these resources post-session. Today's presenters are Peggy Olive, who is a financial capability specialist from the UW-Madison Center for Financial Capability, and Mike Lochner and Frank FRIAR from the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, also known as DATCP. If you need a hard copy of any of the session materials, if you didn't receive those, that email, please contact myself or Elena through Sauk County Extension, and I've put my email and my phone number there for easy contact, and Elena and I will both put our contact into the chat message as well during this event. I'm going to hand it over to, I'm going to hand it over to Peter Kinsman, who is going to support our event today and explain a little bit why this is important, that you are here and why it's important to him.
Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Peter Kinsman. I'm a small, basically we do a grazing beef operation, goats and some hogs. So I'm kind of more of a non-traditional out of the, we're not a traditional corn and soybean farm. My farm was probably an earlier adopter by my grandfather of an organic dairy system. So we're a little different than a lot of our neighbors. So I've kind of taken a little different route than what my grandfather had, but it's kind of in the last few years, it's kind of an interesting, been an interesting roller coaster, I think, for everybody in the farm industry. So, and I know just beginning, you're always running around struggling to, get the new fence built and try to sign up for the most recent government bailout or whatever we're doing. So it's you're kind of balancing a lot of different things. So I know sometimes you kind of want to throw the laptop through the wall, but hopefully these things can help people, give them kind of routes where we can plan long term, so we're not all running from one fire to another on a farm, trying to make sure that we all have a sustainable future, because if the farm doesn't make any money, then it's not sustainable. So hopefully, our presenters can provide some insight and maybe a path for, anybody looking for one, and kind of lead to a little kind of, more bright future and kind of some goals for all of us. So at that, I'll turn it over to Peggy.
Okay, thank you. And it's really interesting to hear, Peter, so I appreciate you sharing your background too as we get started. And I will leave it for Amanda to pull up my slides. Okay, great. As it says with my title, whenever I see my title and name in front of me, I always have to read it because suddenly I forget who I am. My name is Peggy Olive. I'm a financial capability specialist, and I have kind of a dual role appointment. So I work with our Center for Financial Security and our Division of Extension. And I've been with the extension since the late 1900s now. So I've been in multiple roles. I was a Richland County family living educator for about 19 years before moving into my current position. And some of the information I'm going to be sharing today and that we'll be having a conversation around comes from the coaching, training, and background that I had as I got to talking with people more and more about financial goals and moving forward with coming up with their own personal financial plans. I got training in coaching, and I have coaching certification now from an International Coach Federation. I had a training from UW-Madison. So it was a way to bring more of a coaching conversation and goal attainment strategies into those financial conversations. So that's some of the information I'm going to be sharing here today. And I want to thank the group for inviting me too. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so just for the next 25 minutes or so, I just wanted to focus on these 5 key points. And we'll take a little bit deeper dive into these 5 points. So when you're talking with people about financial goals, we want to keep it positive, and I'll share some examples and reasons why we want to do that. Also remembering that those small steps add up. And with number 3, we want to find the fun and immediate gratification, because some of those large goals can take years or a decade or longer. So how do you keep it up meanwhile? And then number 4 is we're going to plan for real life, because that's, what we all live in. And then number 5 is listening and asking questions. And as I go through the first 4 steps, I'll be referring to kind of the listening skills and what we're listening for. And then we're going to just have some conversations about what do I mean by when I say listening, and some of the skills around listening and strategically asking questions when you're talking with people about financial goals. Okay, so number 1, as I mentioned, to keep it positive. And the reason I'm talking about positive financial goals and financial goal setting is that we know from positive psychology and positive psychology coaching is, all emotions serve a purpose. We all experience emotions, and emotions provide us information. They provide us data about, how we perceive things to be going. And in positive psychology, they divide emotions into positive and negative emotions. And that's not to judge emotions. We're not saying, good and bad. We're saying that positive emotions affect us physiologically one way, and then negative emotions affect us physiologically a different way. So there's just some examples of positive and negative emotions on there. And also what the research finds is that our natural resting state, as we're just sitting here on our webinar together, our natural resting state is slightly positive. Like all of us have slightly more positive neurotransmitters going through our bodies. And yeah, we all know some Eeyores that, nothing is ever right, nothing is ever good enough. But in general, that's just how we're all wired. And our challenge is we react more strongly to those negative events. So, we can think about positive emotions as Teflon. We can feel them and they're just, they move on. But those negative emotions are like Velcro. So when we have some negative experience, you can have back when I commute to my office, I could have a beautiful drive, the 15 miles into Richland Center, and glorious scenery, and then a deer leaps in front of my car and I don't remember anything else except for that deer, when you have those negative emotions flooding you. So it's something to think about when people are under a lot of stress. Okay, next slide. And looking a little bit more at the neuroscience behind how we talk to people when we're setting goals. And this comes from, they have a coaching lab at Case Western Reserve University. And they put people under an fMRI machine, and then they also took saliva and blood samples, and they had people engaging in different types of conversation. So one type of conversation was focused on people's future dreams. Where do they see themselves? What's their ideal situation? What's their vision? What's important to them? And what they found when they had that conversation with people is that it triggered their parasympathetic nervous system, which is those positive neurotransmitters like dopamine. People reported an increase in positive emotions. They reported feeling more motivated. They had more hope. They had more options for action. They got more excited about, these are all the different ways I can move forward. And so with our next slide, and okay, thanks. They had a second kind of conversation, and with that other kind of conversation, they had the interviewer focus on, okay, what's the problem? What's going on? What do you want to do about it? It was very concrete. It was very action oriented. And, like so many of the conversations we have when it comes to problem solving. And it triggered people's sympathetic nervous system, which is those negative emotions, that cortisol, which is that fight or flight or freeze neurotransmitter that I think we're all familiar with. And people reported they had an increase in negative emotions, increase in guilt, shame, anger, whatever those would be for them. And also people reported feeling a decrease in motivation, and they also reported kind of shutting down and getting more tunnel vision. So they had less options for action. So it was harder for people to think about how they're going to move forward. So that's just some of the research about why we want to keep our conversations positive. And you can go to the next one. So I'm not talking about Pollyannish, but I'm talking about focusing on the positive. And you can think about positive goals in terms of having that conversation with somebody where they say, well, yeah, I'd really like to come up with a 10-year plan, or I'd really like to start saving for a retirement, or, I could start to track my spending a little bit more, or separate, farm and family bills, whatever they'd like to do. And we know those kind of positive goals increase people's emotional and psychological well-being. And on the flip side, there's also what we call avoidance goals. So those are those goals, and I know all of us have probably had some of these at some point where we say, we want to stop doing something. Oh, I need to stop spending so much, or I need to stop online shopping, or, I can't save anything because, things are really bad right now, where people focus on things that they can't do or have to take away. And we know focusing on those types of avoidance goals increase our distress, and they increase our anxiety levels, and they also decrease our happiness and decrease our health. So people have more health symptoms when you're just focused on that negative and what you have to stop doing. So even when you're talking with people, think about if they say, well, I need to stop spending so much. How can you help them look at that goal more positively? Okay, well, if you stop spending so much, sounds like you'd have more money. Or what would you like to have more money to pay for or to cover? Okay, so next slide. Great job, Amanda. Thank you. Okay, so also thinking about, especially for those long-term goals, small steps add up. When you figure out where you're headed, so hopefully it's some kind of positive benchmark, then it's important to break it down into smaller chunks. When we look at the research behind people setting financial goals, if people just focus on their dream and their vision and what's important, and then don't take that next step, they're less likely to reach their goal. So once you know that vision and where you want to head, then you need to have the conversation about, okay, how can we start chunking this down? So I'll look for somebody in the chat if anyone wants to enter in. So what's an example of a big financial goal? Just kind of something that comes to mind, or throw something out there. Either a chat, or if you want to use microphone, either one.
Gosh, let's see, Peggy, big financial goal.
Oh, we got one in the chat. Amanda, you're off the hook.
Oh,
Saved by the chat.
I know, right?
Okay, so we had a few. So saving money for a down payment on a house. We have to have a farm paid for when I retire. Okay, I'm going with the first one. So Chris entered that goal first. So saving money for a down payment on a house. Okay, so thinking about, you want to have this vision, you want to be a homeowner, maybe you have an idea of what kind of house you'd like, and have some fun with that vision. And then start chunking it down, start doing a little bit of research, where would you like to purchase that house? How much our house is going for? How much would you expect to pay? How much do you need to have down? What kind of programs are open to you in terms of financing, and how much do they require to have down? So you can just do some brainstorming about all of these next steps. And then once you have your list down of all those potential next steps, it's picking one that seems most exciting to you, or most, yeah, after I've dreamt about my ideal house, maybe I'd like to start looking at some going rates. Or maybe for me, I'd like to start looking at financing options so I know how much down payment I would need. So you start chunking it down and set yourself up some goals that are realistic along with the time frames. So it's just keeping that goal moving. Okay, and thanks for the ideas in the chat. Okay, the third point I have on there is to find the fun. I mean, you could see the theme here in terms of keeping things positive and keeping things moving. We also know from looking at the research, when people are working on a long-term goal, they can get very discouraged along the way, and the goal tends to drop off. And so when people are more likely to stick with a long-term goal when they also see some kind of short-term payoff. If they're finding that short-term payoff to be, exciting or rewarding or fun. So we all respond to that immediate gratification. So thinking about kind of benchmarks or celebrations for those small successes. So using the example of a house down payment, once you have your goal set up, maybe you want to have $10,000 down, whatever number you come up that's realistic. Come up with, make it challenging, turn it into some way that you could keep up with. Am I able to save $100 a month? Okay, I did that for a couple of months. Now, how much can I stretch it? Can I save $125 next month? So find something that would, you'd respond to, that would keep it challenging and fun, but not overwhelming. So be sure to kind of build that into your goal. With number 4, I mentioned we all live in, the real world here. And so in our real world, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be challenges. Who would have seen COVID coming a year or so ago? And looking at the goal setting research, we know in the first place, only half of people even bother setting a goal. So for those people who do focus on a goal or report that they have set a goal at some point, less than half the people report reaching that goal. And the number one reason people report, giving up on their goal or abandoning their goal is that they run into some kind of obstacle or challenge that they didn't see coming. So if we can help people expect to run into those kind of obstacles, expect to run into challenges, and build it into their plan, then it's just a matter of course. It's not a signal that this isn't going to work and you need to give up. It's a signal that, yeah, we knew this would be coming and we have a backup plan. So we know resilience and self-efficacy involves seeing challenge as opportunities. And I'm sure resilience is a term that we're all familiar with. Self-efficacy, that's kind of a combination of having self-confidence and also having that seeing yourself as somebody who could respond to. If you have a challenge, you could see it as an opportunity. You could figure out a plan. You could work your way around it, so that you're a problem solver also. So it's kind of that combination. And so we can help people do kind of if-then planning. The fancy term is called mental contrasting. But it's a way to help people come up with, okay, let's say I'm saving for my down payment on the house, or let's say I'm saving to pay off the farm for retiring someday. You know, if something happens, if there's a big unexpected expense, then how long do I put my goal on hold, and how do I know when it's time to go back to revisit that goal? So if something happens, then I'll put my goal on hold till I cover that other expense, and then I immediately am going to pick my goal back up. So it's really preparing for these things are going to happen, and it doesn't mean to scrap everything. It just means to put it on hold. So Amanda, I believe, was going to be really tricky and pull up a poll for us.
Oh, hang on.
We're not going anywhere.
Here we go. All right, so it's one question, and it should show on everyone's screen now.
Yeah, and you can answer as many as you like. So it's thinking about your own resiliency and self-efficacy. When you run into an unexpected challenge, what kind of things do you do? And I would also invite you, if you do share something in the other, you know, you're welcome to put it in the chat just to share your tips or what has worked for you.
Just give it another minute for everyone to have a chance to participate.
Sure.
Once you've made your selection, make sure you hit submit, and then that will, there we go. All right, I will share the results.
Okay, wow, 100% talk to someone, which is always a great strategy. And then there's also just different ways that people are, you know, maybe multiple ways looking at for resources or information, such as through this network, finding comfort through some other practices that you engage in, coming up with a plan B. So even knowing people already have kind of their if-then planning in place, that some of us do this naturally. Okay, thank you for sharing. And I don't see any other ideas in the chat, but I think we get a good idea of what kind of strategies people use just to kind of keep moving. Okay, and that brings us to kind of strategy number 5 to think about when we're talking to people about financial goals in terms of listening and asking questions. So when people are sharing their goal or talking about, you know, a challenge that's getting in the way of their goal, we can hear a lot when we start listening for certain things. And this is something we practice a lot in the financial coaching workshops I do. So when people are talking, we can hear, are there any resources? Are there resources that are help supporting their goal, or maybe some missing resources? You know, those obstacles I just talked about. What kind of values? What's important to them? Maybe they've mentioned family or community. And then emotions. I mean, you can pick up people's emotions if they're excited or feeling discouraged. So when we're listening to people, we're kind of picking up that whole package. And I talked to, she can always back out, but I talked to Amanda about this ahead of time. Unless somebody else has something they'd like to share. And I just had asked Amanda if she'd be willing to just share an example of, you know, maybe a goal she's working towards, and, you know, something she's achieved or is working on, so that we can just practice listening. And I'd invite, as Amanda's sharing, for you to just listen if you hear any resources or obstacles, or pick up any potential values or emotions. And I invite you to put them in the chat. Okay, so I will turn it over to Amanda to share as much or a little as you want.
Okay, so we're saving for a vacation when we can travel again. Let's see. We've been doing some research on where we want to go, what we want to do. We given the fact that I'm not traveling as much for work, I had to redo my budget a little bit. And so I've been able to put, because I'm spending less on essential travel for work, and that's been helpful. So I've been able to reprioritize that way. But then I have my son home from school more often, so that changed our grocery bill. So that also caused a reprioritization of budgeting. So he's 11 and he's an adolescent, so he almost eats more than I do. And he eats constantly. So our grocery bill went up almost equal or equivalent to my travel, I feel like. So that was a potential issue. So we've had to look at that. Where we want to travel is where one of my siblings live. So that's helpful, and that they've extended the ability for us to stay with them, which means good quality family time. So that's helpful. And we're looking, we don't have a set timeline for when we're going to travel, so we're obviously looking at when it's safe to do so, and when we have saved up enough resources to do that, and when my son and my niece and nephew are not in school. Let's see.
I mean, that's a lot, unless there's more you'd like to share. Because you gave us a lot to work with. There was a lot in what you shared. I had entered a couple comments, and then I see Dorothy had put some things in the chat, and which I appreciate that. Thank you, Dorothy. So you can see when people are talking about, it could be something, like people are just talking about the goal or what they're planned to do. It could just be, conversational. And yet when you really listen, you can pick up a lot in terms of what's important to them, what's kind of getting in the way. So you can start identifying a lot with that. So thank you, Amanda, for doing a demonstration with us. Hope that wasn't too painful. Okay. And I hope you get that trip too, sooner rather than later. Okay, so that's listening. And then once we're listening, maybe we might have questions. We might start to be curious, or somebody might even ask, well, I'm not sure where to go from here. They might even ask for some advice. So when it's our turn to kind of ask questions or help prompt people or nudge people along, think about and practice asking your questions starting with a what or a how. So, what's important about your goal? What has been working? How will you get started? How will you know when the time is right? And so thinking about those what or how questions get a person to really kind of dive into their own thoughts and their own planning and get a little bit more deeper into their own details. And that's very different than asking a why question. So we know from some of that neuroscience, when we ask a why question, it can trigger the cortisol, it can trigger defensiveness, so think about some of the why questions that you've been asked in your life. Well, why would you do that? Or, I mean, you could make a what question sound horrible with, what were you thinking? But for the most part, the what questions don't trigger us like a why question that could put us on the defensive. So even thinking about kind of those what questions that, you might be curious about, or how. So I don't want to drag out kind of Amanda's goal that she was so kind to share, but you could think about what kind of questions you might ask in terms of, the what kind of plans or how she's balancing out her spending with the very hungry preteen. So just all of those other details that can help Amanda develop her own plan. And if you have any good questions, I invite you to put them in the chat too. Okay. Okay, so those are kind of the some of the 5 different goal setting and conversation tips, but I also want to kind of couch these with starting the conversation. So timing is everything. So kind of picking that time and place when, you know, somebody is not too stressed or in the middle of something, or if kind of warming people up to the conversation. Remember about keeping it positive. You can really reinforce what people are doing well. As I mentioned, those we don't pay attention. We don't really pause and reflect on those positive feelings. So we just pick up on the negative and what's not going well. So you can really help hold a mirror up to what is working well, just to remind people. And also, you know, respecting people's privacy. They're not going to share everything. So we don't know all the details, and we're not there to, you know, fix it, because people know their situation a lot more than they will ever share with us. And also, if you're in that position to talk with somebody, just understanding confidentiality. You know, that if somebody feels like you're confident and you're not going to share any information with them, you know, unless they say, hey, can you talk with so-and-so about, you know, looking for strategies for retirement, or who their retirement planner is, or who they use to buy their house. I mean, so really respecting that confidentiality unless somebody requests that help. And then remembering resource and referrals, that we don't all have the answers, and we may know some other people who do, or some other resources, so we can be there to kind of extend that resource network. So that's kind of the framework, and I think just the very last slide is just the recap of things to keep in mind then in terms of helping others reach their goals. So if there's any other questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to stick around. I look forward to learning about DATCP resources too. So if anything else comes up, I can always monitor the chat. So thanks for having me, and I hope you got a few ideas about those conversations.
So we can go ahead and pause for a minute if there are any immediate questions for Peggy. Thank you, Peggy, for being on and presenting to our group today. As we're doing that, let's take a minute as well, and we're just going to run a demographic poll. And Elena and I both thank you in advance for doing this. It helps us as extension educators ensure that we are outreaching to the community as much as we possibly can. That is our goal as extension educators, is to make sure that we are reaching as much of our community as possible. So occasionally when we are doing community education, we do run some demographic data. Each of the 4 questions does include a prefer not to respond if you don't care to indicate something more specific. There are 4 questions, and there's a scroll bar on the right-hand side. If you're on a phone, if you're connecting by a smartphone, then I think you can just move your screen up and it'll get you all 4 questions. So as people are kind of completing that, you're welcome to put any more questions for Peggy or unmute and ask them directly as we finalize that. Just take another minute or so. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Thank you all for completing that. Oops, and of course. I'm going to introduce Mike and Frank, who are here from DATCP. Mike, after graduating from the University of Wisconsin River Falls in 1979, Mike spent the first 15 years of his professional career in the agronomy industry. He then went on to work for more than 20 years in agricultural agriculture, oh my goodness, lending with 3 different financial organizations. For the past 5+ years, Mike has enjoyed being able to use his vast experience in agriculture finance to provide services through the Wisconsin Farm Center, where he helps deliver both financial counseling and transition planning advice to Wisconsin farmers. Welcome to Mike. Frank also attended the University of Wisconsin-Platteville and earned a bachelor's and master's degree in agriculture during his college years. Before joining the Wisconsin Farm Center team 13 years ago, Frank built a lengthy resume in agriculture lending with more than 30 years at Badgerland Financial. In Frank's current role at the Farm Center, he works as an economic development consultant and provides Wisconsin farmers daily advice on various financial management topics. He also takes pride in being able to help guide farmers through complex challenges related to transitioning a farm operation to the next generation. Welcome to Frank. And I'm going to stop share and hand the presentation over to Mike. Welcome to you both.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Nice job, Peggy. Let's see. Give me a moment here to oops.
That looks great.
I don't have my slides. Oh, let me just. Okay. Yes, Frank and I both work for the Wisconsin Farm Center, and the building we're located in is known as POSOB, and picture in the foreground there, that is a Prairie Oak. So we're Prairie Oak State Office Building is what POSOB stands for. And it's very scenic. We are on top of a hill over off of Agriculture Drive on the southeast side of Madison, essentially. And we are in the area of the Beltline and Stoughton Road. Yeah, the Wisconsin Farm Center is housed in the Division of Ag Development, and we have 3 other partners or other bureaus in the Division of Ag Development, and they are, as you can see, we work most closely with the marketing and outreach portions. That is home to, many of you will recognize, Allison Dairyland, and that is the marketing and outreach bureau is home to Allison Dairyland. And then we have other, Something Special from Wisconsin is another one in there. And then we have a few other, other members who work in the marketing and outreach area. And then international, we don't work real closely with them, but occasionally we do get either asked to or we ask them for some feedback on maybe different projects that we might be working on. And then economic development, and as you noted by Frank's title, we do have a role in developing economic development of Wisconsin agriculture. In the Farm Center, we have a small role, but in marketing and outreach and international, they have a larger role of that economic development. And then this is one of your handouts that was sent to you. This just spells out, our hours that the Farm Center is open for available, call availability. We do have a voicemail system. That voicemail system through the 800 number is a 24/7 system, and it will go into a voicemail system, and that voicemail then is converted to an email. So we're very fortunate to have that. Whoop, slow down, Mike. But we were a broad mandate in the mid 80s, And we are actually controlled by state statute. You know, and we are mandated under state statute to provide the services for the Wisconsin farmers. And that was all born out of the 1980s farm crisis that hit not only Wisconsin, but nationwide. We offer financial business planning, succession and transition planning, as well as conflict and legal financial mediation. And then we also have a non-regulatory vet on staff, herd-based diagnostics. And the following slides will, you know, identify each of these programs more specifically. And then a farmer wellness program.
Mike?
Yes.
I don't think the slides are advancing.
Okay. Amanda, let me start from the beginning, because I was wondering about that, because I'm in a different mode in my.
If you want, I can run the slides for you from.
Yeah, maybe that'd be best.
Okay. Do you want to just stop the share and then I'll keep running them for you.
How was that?
Technology is our friend until it isn't, right?
Right.
So if you go up to the top of your screen, there should be way up at the top, it'll say stop share in red.
Otherwise, I can do the request for the remote.
That's okay. I have the presentation saved from where I was doing Peggy's. Okay. Yeah, I got it.
Oh, wait.
Oh, I've got it.
Found it.
There you go. Okay. Let's see. All right. You tell me when to stop.
Right there is where I left off. So advance
Awesome.
to the next slide, please.
Okay.
Those are photographs of everybody that's in the farm center. Dan is our program supervisor. He's been with us for about 6 months. Frank, of course, as many of you know, and then myself, and then Tracy Brandel. Tracy is in charge of our mental health and wellness program. And then Kevin is in charge of our mediation program on the bottom left. And then that is our veterinarian, John Tracy, on the bottom right. And then our LTEs are Jack Oreda. He works out of his home up in the Appleton area. And then Morgan Cabot is an LTE, for those of you that aren't familiar with the state acronyms, that's a limited term employee. So Morgan is on her second 6-month span of her employment, and Jack has worked with the farm center in previous years. Jack has over 30 years of experience, much like Frank did in the Farm Credit Services system. Next slide, please. Farm center strengths, as I mentioned previously, it was a broad mandate under state law and brought about in the 80s during the farm crisis. And under that state law, we are bound to protect the privacy of any of our cases that we work with. So anytime if you feel the need to call the farm center for no matter what it might be, we may share that information among the farm center staff on a case-by-case basis. Now, this would be mostly bouncing ideas off each other. You know, primarily there's 4 of us that work on taking the calls, Frank, myself, Tracy, and Kevin. And we might bounce suggestions or look for information from them, utilizing their broad range of experiences to bounce questions after we get off a phone call. But nothing goes outside of the farm center staff as far as any descriptions about your case. We do have, between all of us, I know between Frank, Jack, and myself, we have in excess of 80 years of ag lending experience. Tracy has probably about somewhere between 8 and 10 years of working with FSA and working in a tax accounting role. She was basically, she was the intake person and helped with the daily books and the monthly books and utilized QuickBooks. And we do work and do these types of presentations with non-government organizations. And so we do have a history of successful collaboration among, other government entities, and extension, obviously, and other non-government programs. So if anybody, when we do get back to these, get through the Zoom trend that we're in now, we will go out to organizations all throughout the state and work with them on a local presentation. And then one thing is particularly important when we get into a financial review of a case, we are an objective, independent third party. Next slide, please. From the standpoint of what we do for financial counseling, you see there, we review balance sheets, and we review it not just 1 year's balance sheet, but we prefer to have a 3 to 5 year trend. Then we can get a real feel for what direction the farm is trending. Either is it going forward, is it maintaining, or is it descending in their financial position? Does descending meaning, how are they losing equity on their balance sheet? And then we also review cash flows, and this is where we again prefer to have a 3 to 5 year trend. This, in a lender's view, this fits with the balance sheet because number of years of profits do show gain in equity on the balance sheet through acquisition of assets and concurrently reduction in your debts on the balance sheet. So we review those cash flows, and then we're able to analyze profitability and viability from that. We do a similar analysis as to what your lender would go through, where we take the tax return, or we take the information from the lender or from the farmer, and we put it in our spreadsheet programs and can determine a profitability and then determine a debt service coverage from that. And along with that debt service coverage analysis, we are also then able to, analyze your debt structure. Maybe if you're, like many farms from 16 through 19, specifically in the dairy industry and in the crop industry, they were not having a lot of profitability. They were losing money and maybe making small profits annually, but that was so dependent on what they were receiving for their prices. All farmers, anyone involved in agriculture sales and marketing understands that they are price takers, not price makers. So we analyze the debt structure and see if there's a means by which we could approach the lender with maybe doing a restructure of their debt to help move some of the debt from maybe operating loans that they cannot pay back during the current year or maybe the past 1 or 2 years, and seeing how that would look further down the balance sheet, either combining it as part of an intermediate debt or a long-term debt. Next slide, please. And this is, we've had a lot of inquiries into this transition plan, transition planning and succession planning standpoint or feature of what the Farm Center does for helping farmers get through these financial, and that's through this financial, and whether or not the financial stability is sufficient enough to move the farm forward to the next generation. And that's what transition and succession planning means. How do we, or is there a way in which we can move the farm to the next generation, from the outgoing generation or the retirement age farmer to the younger generation that has different ideas and has a different approach and maybe a different understanding of what they need to do in agriculture to move the farm forward. A lot of that we do prefer to see operating agreements set up. We also are mindful of tax implications. And transition and succession planning for the outgoing generation or the retiring generation, this plan is also part of their entire estate planning process. So we do have discussions with them on, well, what, you have the siblings or the incoming generation to help take over the farm. What about your other children that are not involved in the farm? How do you propose, or how can we help you take care of, their needs or their share of the estate? Next slide, please. This is the program that Kevin is involved with, the farm mediation program. And I'll have to make sure that grammatical error on program gets corrected. I have to let Dan know that that needs to be changed. What the mediation program is that's a federally, through the USDA, that's a federally funded program where, again, during the 80s, the farm crisis of the 80s, there was a lot of farmers that had a need and had a desire. Well, we're not getting along with our lender. How can we come to the table and maybe try to help work this thing through to help us save the farm? The other key feature is the farm mediation program is no cost to participants and confidential, but any of the farm center services, there is no cost to participants. It's part of what's called the general public revenues. And I like to tell farmers, I say, well, this is part of what your tax, your real estate taxes are going toward, is to help you in these situations so that there is no cost to you from the farm center services. Now, the mediation program is a staff of volunteer mediators, but they come from all different backgrounds. Peggy, maybe you know of and have worked with Roger Williams. Yeah, Roger is one of our volunteer mediators, and I mentioned that because Roger was a former coach and did a lot of family mediations while he was on his term in his career with the UW Extension. He helped, and it's a real passion of his, is to help family farms, work through their family issues and come to an agreement. And that's really the purpose of the volunteer mediators. And there's other mediators that are, they have been involved in public arbitrators and public mediations. You know, most notably, you know, unions, like teachers unions, you know, they would be arbitrators or mediators for between school boards and the teachers union. And then there are some that are also municipal, having a lot of municipal mediation and arbitration experience, which would be, you know, for like county highway employees or county employees, helping them resolve issues on new contracts with the county boards. Now, for any FSA program that's under the, that's FSA is part of the USDA umbrella, and the USDA, any FSA or Farm Service Agency program has a mandate that they need to go through mediation. So all 50 states have a mediation program so that they can move through any USDA disputes. And whether it's on the farm loan side, the farm program side, rural home resident, you know, rural home, Natural Resource Conservation Service, otherwise known as NRCS. Any of those programs that are under the FSA and USDA program is eligible for the mediation program. And then now for other disputes other than any FSA and USDA programs, participation is voluntary, whether it's a family dispute that Roger might be involved with, or if it's an FSA, excuse me, if it's a lender dispute where, you know, where the farmer wants to mediate with his lender. If the lender's putting pressure on them or maybe didn't approve an operating loan for them, you know, the lender is not required in the Wisconsin program to come to be involved in the mediation. So it is voluntary. But if you have a good working relationship with your lender, normally they're willing to work it out or with you. And if that involves mediation, you know, on rare occasions, they will come to the mediation table. Next slide, please. This is John Tracy's area that I mentioned. We had a veterinarian on staff, and John was on the lower right-hand corner of the page. And he is a non-regulatory staff, you know, farm center staff veterinarian. And what he will do is he will make a farm visit, and he will do he will look for whole herd health, cow comfort, and production issues. They'll do body scoring on cows. He'll do ketosis screening and ketosis, you know, or better known as ketosis tests, you know, but he is focused on the whole herd health and any issues that you might be having, you know, on the farm from maybe a feed standpoint, to identify feed or micronutrient deficiencies, or where micronutrients might exceed the optimum areas. We had some situations where there were toxicity issues in herds, and he does or can, you know, partner with local vets and nutritionists, and other service providers. He will work very closely with the vet and the nutritionist if the farmer is willing to have him work with them and help resolve, because you know, more than one head put together, you know, usually there's can be a solution, or somebody can identify a little bit more to the issue at hand. And this is also available at no cost to dairy farmers, as mentioned before. And when he leaves the farm, he completes the, he sends samples off that he may take, whether they're blood samples or feed samples, and he will send them off to get those analyzed. And then when those test results come back, he will put that in a comprehensive report, which goes back to the farmer, and then he'll have recommendations for that as far as how to maybe help, move the herd forward and help improve production. Next slide, please. And this was one of your other handouts that you received. And this is the area that Tracy and also Morgan, Morgan is our LTE, but Tracy is the lone female in the farm center other than Morgan. She handles this program, and she has done a very good job at improving this program. And a lot of it was was out of necessity, because in 2017, 2018, and 2019, we could see a growing need because of the financial stress on farms. We've all heard about various, suicides that have occurred on the farms through the years. And I know there's one member of the Farmer Angel Network that has very involved after she lost her husband to a suicide. Next slide, please. Well, let me just hold on, please. Could you back up? I'm sorry. We do have, I just want to mention there is a service provided for 24/7 Farmer Wellness Hotline. That is listed there, and that is a counseling service that is on staff to take calls. Very used to taking calls from farmers, and they are on staff 24/7. Then the bottom left of that screen, we do have a provider up in Northeast Wisconsin that's working with us, and that is she will do telehealth or available on video conference on the web, such as Zoom meetings or other Skype meetings or other available means that she may have at her disposal. Primarily, I'm sure many of the farmers that would want the video conference, that would be by either Zoom or by web, because those are the two most common. And then lastly, on the bottom right is our counseling voucher services. This is, we have counseling vouchers, and that is for free, confidential, in-person counseling sessions. And we try to set up the counseling provider to the farmer so that it's in a 30 to 40 mile radius of where they live. They're not in every little community, as you all may well know, but usually sometimes there's a stigma that farmers are a little bit concerned about going within their own small area, within 10 to 20 miles, because of the confidentiality. So, and this is a no-cost service for these services as well, like all the other farm center services. Next slide, please. And this just says a little bit more about how the response to the counseling center program, counseling voucher program, and then why the need was precipitated. I think most of us, or all of us, can recall back in 2009 and 10 when the dairy prices were well below operating expense, operating cost of production, that that there was a need for this counseling vouchers. And this was when it was developed. It was back in 2009, or maybe a few years earlier to that, because there was such a concern with dropping milk prices. And the bullet point number 2, 180 participating counselors across the state. That's where Tracy has done a real good job in her recruitment of in all areas of the state to bring on and get the word out about the farmer counseling voucher program. And each farmer is issued initially 3 counseling vouchers. They can be request if the need should arise for more vouchers. But the vouchers are eligible to not maybe the farmer, but potentially, it's eligible for the farm wife or any member of the farm family. As we all have heard that many people in high school and middle school are going through a lot of mental health concerns right now, not being with their friends in school, being, in the rural areas, as we all know, there's, it's very hit and miss with how reliable the internet service, is in those rural areas. So, you can see by the chart there that there was a big need in 2009 and 10, dropped down, and that stands to reason. When the prices are better or at break even, or maybe there's modest profits in the farming industry, the farm financial stress is not as great. But when they're all, when the accounts receivables are building due to not enough money to pay bills, that's when the financial stress gets real great on the farm. Next slide, please. This is one of the things that our LTE Morgan has been influential in putting together. She has a very strong background in marketing. But these were podcasts that were created, and these are available through the Farm Center website, as you see at the bottom of the screen there. And the Farm Center website is listed there. And these podcasts, typically, I think they're 20 to 30, maybe 40 minutes in length, and they're available at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Next slide, please. I think we're coming to the end. And then the other initiatives for 2021 is we are revising a job hunting manual, and that manual will be put on the website. So there's either a printed workbook version that we can send out to the requesting individual, or there's a digital version that just can be looked at. Career coaching counselor vouchers, that there are not any vouchers available yet. However, that's coming down the line here in 2021. And then farm culture online training programs. These were supposed to be made available during the 2020 year. However, we had to put them off because they were all in-person trainings. So we had to kind of recreate the wheel and figure out, well, how are we going to provide this training when we had already set up for them to be in person. So we're slowly but surely, this has become the online it's followed the online program. And then for 2021, there'll be more information coming out about this. But it's, as you can see there, and the best description of is, we're trying to help mental health providers, general practitioners, and ag service providers understand more about the stresses on the farm, whether it's financial, emotional, or whatever stress the farmer is coming you know, whatever the stresses are facing the farmer, we're going to try and help expose people that maybe aren't that familiar, only have occasional interaction with farm families, and that they understand and where the farm is coming from. Next slide, please. And any questions? I don't know if those three chat items are from the last presenter.
I think so. I don't see
Yeah,
any new chats.
I don't see any new ones in there. But feel free to unmute the mics if you want to just ask a question, or if you want to put it into the chat. I'll try to respond here. Otherwise, if you have the next slide, please. I think Frank and my next slide, please. I think, yeah, there's my email address and Frank's email address, as well as our cell phone numbers for the direct contact. You can certainly call us and ask us or email us any questions that you might have in addition. Okay.
Mike, this is Dorothy Harms.
Yep.
Just one quick question and then a follow-up comment. That previous slide, you talked about 2021 initiatives. You said agricultural service providers. Kind of, can you be more specific? What, you know, who is that directed toward?
Well, I think it's for like dairy fieldmen and you know, maybe agronomists, nutritionists, those that may not be, you know, have a good understanding of maybe some of the financial stresses on the farm, because they don't get that, they're not that greatly involved in farm finance. They're more involved in just their own little area of the farm and providing services to the farm families. You know, but there's a relationship there. And that's what's real key, is to help those ag service providers. And I'm, you know, we've had some interest from veterinarians to try and maybe help understand, you know, the stresses that they're going through from a financial perspective, and, you know, how that affects their temperament, their mood, you know, as far as how and when the vet might be out there. So those three, I would say, are the most common. Frank, I don't know if you have any other suggestions to that about what agri service providers that might be.
I think, Mike, you covered it well. It could be a mechanic going out on a farm, anybody servicing a farm that notices stress, or maybe the farmer shares the stress with them and they're wondering, how do we handle it? So it could be open to anybody.
Yeah, that's a good one, Frank. You know, repairmen from the implement dealers.
Okay, and then I guess just my comment I wanted to put out to the group listening today. My husband and I have taken advantage of those vouchers. And I just wanted to, you know, say that, yeah, they are real. They, you know, we were able to talk through things with a counselor when we were going through our transition out of dairy farming. We've been in contact with the farm center. Frank has been out to our farm at least once to kind of sit down with us as we talk about transition planning. And he actually is pretty good about following up. I guess that's one of the compliments I'll give to the group, is that you don't just call them once and they kind of take your call and it's done. They've been very good about following up and checking in and making sure things are still okay or better than they were the last time they talked to you. And so I just kind of wanted to let other folks know that, yeah, this is definitely an opportunity for services that are available to farmers.
Dorothy, thank you for those kind words.
Yeah, I want to say the same thing, Dorothy. Thank you. I've talked with you on once or maybe two occasions, primarily regarding the Farmer Angel Network. Frank is our mentor for any of the transition and succession planning. and estate planning work that we do with. So we've all learned a lot from him, and we know we all have much more to learn from him.
Thanks to Mike and Frank both for presenting today. If anyone has any questions, hopefully they'll be able to stay on for a few more minutes. I just want to remind people of our next event coming up in February on the 10th at 1 p.m. Elena Voss, the Sauk County Extension agricultural educator, will be talking about breaking the farm stress cycle. I believe we will also have a Richland County presenter, Project Recovery, and Chris, I believe, is on the call today as well. Chris Frake from Project Recovery will be presenting with Elena, and so we're excited to be able to present that in February. So make sure you mark your calendar. If you need a link, you can, the link is there. I can put it up on the chat when I end the presentation. You could also find it on the Farmer Angel Network site and on the extension site, or by contacting Farmer Angel Network at gmail.com, or by contacting myself or Elena. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you to our presenters, and we'll be on for a few minutes if you have any questions. Elena, if you want to end the recording.